I stand in the suffocating darkness of this abandoned church, my breath shallow and ragged, heart pounding in a relentless drumbeat that echoes through my mind. The faint whisper of the wind seeping through broken stained glass and shattered pews feels like a spectre, whispering secrets I dare not face. My hands tremble as I clutch the shovel, dirt caked beneath my nails, a cruel reminder of what I've done. I hear his voice, shattered and broken, pleading for mercy, but mercy is a luxury I've stripped away. I remember the confession, that moment when he looked at me with hollow eyes and whispered of horrors inflicted on a girl so innocent, her name lost in the dark. I see his face twisted in despair, desperation bleeding from every pore, begging me to save him, to forgive him. But I didn't. Instead, I decided that true penance was sealing his fate, burying him alive beneath the earth where his screams could no longer reach the heavens. I kneel, pressing my palm against the cold, damp dirt, feeling the weight of my sins pressing down on me like an anvil. As I shovel the soil over him, I hear the last of his muffled cries, raw, primal sounds that echo in my mind long after the earth has swallowed him whole. "Please," he gasped through cracked lips, his voice fading into the darkness. And I told him nothing, only watched as the last flicker of life slipped from his eyes and left behind a hollow stare that haunts me still. I can't deny the rush of adrenaline that surged through me when I made that final decision, the unbreakable resolve to silence him forever. It was a brutal act, born from rage and guilt, a twisted redemption I convinced myself I deserved for my complicity. I hear the echo of my own voice in my head, repeating the words I uttered to him, "You will never hurt anyone again, not on my watch." The irony is bitter, a cruel twist of fate that I, a man sworn to serve and protect, became the executioner of a broken soul. I shove the last handful of earth onto his grave and cover it carefully, as if that small act can somehow erase the violence I've unleashed. I stand wiping sweat and dirt from my brow, knowing I've crossed a line from which there's no return. The silence around me is deafening, a heavy shroud that suffocates all hope of redemption. Behind my eyes I see his face, haunted, imploring, reminding me that I've become something far worse than the sinner I once judged. The burden of what I've done will forever stain my soul, and as I turn away from the fresh mound of freshly buried darkness, I realize I've unearthed a secret I can never truly bury. No matter how deep I dig, I sink deeper into the wooden pew, the rough surface pressing into my knees, yet I feel as if my body is hollowed out from within. The dim candlelight flickers, casting elongated shadows that dance across the stone walls, whispering secrets I dare not voice. My hands tighten into trembling fists as I prepare to confess the unconfessable, my own darkness, my own sin so profound that it scars me beyond redemption. The room is silent except for my breath, steady yet ragged, each inhale a reluctant admission, each exhale a fragile attempt at denial. I look inward, trying to summon the words, but they coil like serpents in my throat. How strange it feels, this act of confessing my own wickedness. Imagine a priest unburdened by divine grace, instead burdened by the weight of his own evil. I close my eyes momentarily, seeking refuge in the darkness behind my eyelids, but all I see is the image of that man, the one I buried alive. His face, twisted in agony and shame, haunts me as if it were seared into my very soul. I remember the confession he made, the truth he whispered during that moment of vulnerability. A confession so vile that my stomach churns even now. And yet instead of mercy, I felt only a surge of primal fury, a visceral compulsion to silence him. The voice in my head screams that I was justified, that the world would be better off without him, that my hands, though trembling, became the instruments of a terrible justice. I still hear the muffled sobs of his last breaths, the dirt pressed into his lips, the cold earth closing over him as a shroud. My mind spirals back. I had convinced myself that it was mercy. Mercy for the victims, mercy for myself. But now in this quiet prison of my own making, I see through the illusion. I see the abyss I have gazed into, and it stares back with unblinking eyes. I recall the moment I sealed his fate, the moment I chose darkness over redemption. The act was brutal, indisputable, an act driven not only by rage but by a twisted sense of justice that I now know was a mask for my own guilt, my own helplessness. I tighten my grip on my knees, feeling the rough fabric of my robes rub against my skin. grounding me yet warning me of the depths I've fallen into. I whisper to myself a mantra of shame. I am supposed to forgive, to heal, to carry the burden of salvation. But what I've done, what I've become, defies every sacred principle. I am no longer a shepherd of souls. I am a harbinger of silence, a man who has buried his own conscience beneath layers of earth and darkness. The confessional's shadows seem to grow heavier, pressing in around me, suffocating. I wonder if the divine can truly forgive what I've concealed, or if I am damned by my own hand, a priest who has become the architect of death's quiet, unyielding grip. Every fiber of my being screams for absolution, yet I know that no prayer can cleanse this stain. My secret is a serpent coiled within my chest, deadly and relentless. As I sit here, trembling with the weight of confession, I realize that I am imprisoned by my own silence. I have buried more than just that man. I have buried a part of myself, a part I can never exhume without paying a terrible price. The guilt is a stone in my gut, heavy and unforgiving, pressing down with each passing second. I have become the very evil I once judged, and now I stand at the precipice, staring into a chasm from which I cannot escape. My voice, when it finally emerges, is barely a whisper, an echo of my fractured soul. I confess not just what I've done, but what I am: a fallen priest, a murderer cloaked in piety, a man lost in his own darkness. The words taste bitter on my tongue, and as I speak them into the silence, I realize that my confession is no longer about seeking forgiveness. It is about acknowledging the monster I have become, a creature who has buried the truth so deep that no light can reach it. And yet, amidst the darkness, there flickers a faint hope. Perhaps in admitting my sins, I might find some fragment of redemption. Or maybe this is the beginning of my permanent damnation, a testament to the depths of my corruption. I do not know. All I know is that I have carried this secret for too long, and now in this sacred, lonely space, I lay it bare, an offering of my broken soul, hoping that someday, somehow, I might find peace amid the ruins of my own making. I close my eyes and see him again, small, trembling, clutching at my cassock as if I might somehow protect him from the storm inside himself. The boy's tears were rivers that day, flowing freely down his face, and I remember the desperate plea that escaped his trembling lips. Help me. Please, help me. I can't bear it anymore. My stomach clenched with 1,000 conflicting emotions, anger, shame, pity, fear, and yet I hesitated. A flicker of doubt, of weakness, clouded my mind. I felt the weight of my own hypocrisy pressing down on me. How many times had I preached forgiveness, mercy, salvation, and yet in that moment I faltered, paralyzed by the grotesque reality of what I knew, what I sensed, what I feared. His eyes searched mine, pleading silently, demanding something I couldn't give. I felt the heat of his small palm against my hand, trembling, desperate. I wanted to push him away, to dismiss his words as the incoherent ramblings of a frightened child. But something deeper rooted itself in my chest, an unspoken dread that I chose to ignore, a suspicion that gnawed at my conscience with every beat of my heart. I looked away, unable to confront what I had already begun to suspect. That day I failed him. I failed my vows, my calling, my moral compass. I told myself I would keep his secret, that somehow silence would serve as a shield. But as the days turned into weeks, the memory of his tear-streaked face haunted me. I found solace in prayer, in the flickering candlelight, but beneath that serenity lurked a darkness I refused to acknowledge. I buried my doubts deep, beneath layers of scripture and ritual, convincing myself that this was for his protection, and perhaps for my own. Yet, as the shadows lengthened, so did the weight on my soul. I carried that secret like a ticking bomb, knowing that one day it might explode and shatter everything I held sacred. I compartmentalized my guilt, convincing myself that I was doing God's work, that my silence was a form of mercy. But inside I was crumbling, each false reassurance chipping away at what little remains of my integrity. The boy's face returned to me often, blurred and distorted by my own denial, and I wondered how much longer I could keep this hidden without losing myself entirely. The night I buried the man, oh, how vividly I remember that terrible act, was not just a physical act. It was an erasure, a silencing of the truth that dared to threaten my sanctity. I dug into the earth with trembling hands, each shovelful of soil feeling like a layer of my own conscience being buried alive. The darkness enveloped me, cold and suffocating as I pressed the dirt over the corpse. Was I trying to hide my sins from the world? Or was I desperately trying to hide from myself? That act, a grotesque, irreversible choice, marked the point of no return. I looked at my own reflection in the church's cracked mirror afterward and saw a stranger staring back. My eyes, once filled with faith and purpose, now shone with something far darker. Regret, guilt, a haunted look that no prayer could wash away. Every prayer I whispered afterward felt hollow, like an echo bouncing off an empty cathedral. And now, as I sit here, haunted by the memory, I feel the ghost of that boy's trembling voice echoing in my mind. His last plea, his tears, his innocence, buried alongside the truth I refused to face. I am a priest, an agent of hope and salvation, and yet I am the architect of my own corruption. I have buried more than just a man. I have buried my conscience, my morality, my very soul. The secret festers within me, a serpent coiled tightly, whispering insidiously that I am beyond redemption. Sometimes late at night, I ponder whether there is any path back from this abyss. I think of that boy, of his innocence shattered, and I curse myself for my cowardice. I think of the man I murdered, not with my hands but with my silence. I wonder if confession could ever cleanse what I have done, or if I am doomed to carry this darkness for eternity. The church's silence is deafening. No absolution, no forgiveness, only the relentless echo of my own guilt. I wanted to believe that my faith could save me, that prayer might undo what has been done. But I know deep down that some sins are too heavy, some truths too horrifying to ever be fully absolved. I am trapped in this hell of my own making, a priest who has become a monster, a man who has buried the most sacred parts of himself beneath layers of lies and deception. And yet, I cling to the fragile hope that somehow, someday, I might find a way to unearth the truth, to face it, and perhaps in some twisted way to find redemption. Maybe the confession I fear most is not yet spoken, and the reckoning I dread is still to come. For now I remain here in the shadows of my own soul, knowing that the darkness I've unleashed is far from over. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling as I recall the weight of my secret, burying the man who confessed to horrors no one else dared hear. The earth's cold embrace still echoes his final cries, echoing my own silent torment. Every breath I take is stained with guilt, yet I cannot unearth what I've buried. My soul teeters on the edge of salvation and damnation, haunted by the unspoken truth that now defines me. The shadows around me seem to lean in closer, whispering accusations I refuse to face directly. I remember the moment I made the decision, how fear clamped around my spine, paralyzing me into inaction. I saw the terror in his eyes as he begged me to help, to do something, anything. But instead, I let the darkness seep in, convinced that silence would be safer, that burying him would serve some twisted sense of justice. Now I wonder if I have become the very monster I once condemned. My mind races through every detail, the hurried shoveling, the dirt falling over him like a shroud. I can still feel the weight of the earth pressing down on my conscience, smothering the faint glimmer of hope that once flickered inside me. How did I become this? How did I walk so far away from the vows I swore, from the compassion I was supposed to embody? Each step I take away from that grave feels like a step deeper into my own darkness. I try to focus on the flickering flame of the candle, its fragile glow casting shifting shadows that seem to mock me. I think about the confessions I have heard, sins confessed in desperation, seeking redemption, but mine remain unspoken, gnawing inside me like a relentless parasite. I am a priest, a vessel of hope, and yet I am the architect of my own ruin. I have created a prison for my soul, one lined with lies and the fear of exposure. The guilt is a living thing writhing within me, whispering that I am beyond forgiveness. I replay moments in my mind, how I could feel the weight of his words, how I should have acted, how I should have spoken out. Instead, I chose silence, my silence. The silence of a man who believed his faith could shield him from consequences, who thought that burying his sins would erase them. But the earth is unforgiving, and so am I. Sometimes I wonder if I can still salvage what remains of my integrity. Is redemption even possible now? Or have I irrevocably crossed a line from which there is no return? The idea of confession terrifies me. What if I reveal everything? and in doing so destroy what little hope I cling to. The shame is a shroud I cannot tear away, no matter how much I pray or plead for forgiveness. I picture the boy, the innocent Corwanya, his trusting face now marred by the darkness I helped unleash. My stomach churns at the thought. I betrayed everything sacred for a moment's cowardice. That innocence shattered under the weight of my sins haunts me. I see him in my dreams, a ghost with eyes full of betrayal and despair. I wonder if I could ever truly forgive myself, if redemption is even a possibility after what I have done. The Church's silence is my prison. I hear no divine voices answering my prayers, only the echo of my own despair. I have become a hollow vessel, faithless, broken, and lost in a maze of guilt. I cling to the faint hope that someday I might find the courage to face the truth, to unearth the buried secrets, and confront my guilt head-on. But that day feels distant, perhaps unreachable. For now I remain here in the shadows, hiding from the light that could expose me. The darkness I've created feels all-encompassing. It seeps into every corner of my soul, strangling the last remnants of hope. I am painfully aware that my confession may never come, that I will carry this burden alone until the end of my days. Yet a part of me still clings to the possibility of redemption, not for my sake, but for what remains of my humanity. I wonder if the man I buried would want me to confess. Would he want me to carry this guilt, or would he prefer I keep silent, forever hiding the truth beneath the earth? These questions swirl in my mind, an unending storm of remorse and fear. I am caught between the desire for absolution and the dread of exposure. If I had the courage, I would speak now, tell someone everything. But my voice is lost in the labyrinth of my own fears. Instead, I sit here, in this dim candle-lit chamber, haunted by the specters of my sins. I am a priest, yet I have betrayed my vows, betrayed my calling, and betrayed my conscience. The cost of my silence has become too high to bear. I close my eyes, trying to block out the memories, but they persist, every detail etched into my mind like scars. I recognize that I am a monster, created by my own choices, my own cowardice. And yet, I hold on to a fragile hope that somehow within the depths of this darkness, there is still a tiny spark of redemption waiting to be ignited. Perhaps someday, I will find the strength to face the truth, to unbury not just the man I killed, but the shattered fragments of my own soul. Until then, I remain here tormented, isolated in the shadows, an unrepentant priest who has buried much more than just the body beneath the earth. I have buried my morality, my hope, and perhaps my very salvation. And in this silent, endless night, I wonder if I will ever find the courage to unearth what I've hidden, or if I am doomed to carry this hell within me forever. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling as I'm overwhelmed by the memory of my betrayal, my sacred vows shattered beneath the weight of my own helplessness. The silence in the church feels deafening, a suffocating echo of the horrors I could not stop, the atrocities I was powerless to prevent. I recall the man's confession, raw and desperate, and I remember how my body betrayed me, how my mind froze in disbelief and horror. My mind replays the moment I realized what he had admitted. A sickening wave of shame washes over me. I was supposed to be his shepherd, his confidant, a vessel of divine compassion. Instead, I became a witness to unspeakable evil and an accessory to its concealment. The image of my own helplessness gnaws at me relentlessly, like a jagged scar etched into my conscience. I had felt the sharp sting of shame, but also a perverse sense of duty. Duty to protect, to hide, to bury the truth deep beneath the earth. The betrayal of my vows tangles around my thoughts like barbed wire. I had sworn chastity, vowed to be pure in body and spirit. Yet in that moment, I felt my own morality crumbling beneath the weight of the unspeakable. My body had reacted instinctively, but my mind had recoiled, paralyzed by the horror and the shame of what I could not control. The shame of my impotence, the horror of what I saw, these feelings tore at my soul, threatening to drown me in despair. I had always believed in divine justice, in redemption, in the power of truth to set one free. And yet, I had allowed silence to become my sanctuary, my refuge from the shame. As I kneel here now, I am painfully aware of the betrayal that pulses through my veins. I betrayed not only my vows, but also my conscience, my very humanity. I had convinced myself that burying the man alive was an act of mercy, a way to protect the innocent, to shield my flock from the darkness that lurked in our midst. But beneath that justification lies a darker truth. I was afraid. Afraid of losing my position. Afraid of the chaos that would ensue if the truth came to light. Afraid of confronting the monstrous evil that had been so close. And yet, I had done nothing. The earth's cold grip still echoes his final cries, muffled by mud and darkness. But inside me the screams persist. They echo louder than any physical sound, reverberating through the hollow chambers of my conscience. I can feel the weight of that silence pressing down, suffocating me. I wonder if I will ever forgive myself, or if this guilt will become my eternal prison. Every moment I have kept silent feels like a betrayal of my faith, of my calling, of what is right. I am haunted by the memory of his face, distorted yet pleading, and I am consumed by the thought that I could have done more. My impotence, my cowardice have turned me into something I despise. I watch my own reflection in the flickering candle flame and see the hollow shell of a man who once believed in divine mercy, now corrupted by shame and fear. I am no longer the priest I once aspired to be. I am a man haunted by his own failures, by the abomination of silence. Yet amidst this tumult, a flicker of defiance persists. Somewhere within, a small voice whispers that redemption might still be possible. Perhaps, in some distant, undiscovered part of myself, there remains a fragment of hope, fragile but alive, that someday I might unbury not only the body beneath the earth, but also the guilt that festers within. Maybe I can find the strength to face the horrors I have hidden, to confront the darkness not with fear but with truth. For now, I remain here, trembling and broken, clutching my hands in prayer that feels more desperate than divine. I pray for forgiveness, not just for myself, but for the boy I failed, for the church I betrayed. I pray that someday I will be able to unearth the truth and unshackle my soul from this hell I have created. Until then, I will carry this burden, this betrayal of everything I once held sacred. I am a priest who has buried much more than just a man. I have buried my integrity, my hope, and perhaps my salvation. And as the candle flickers in the silence, I wonder if I will ever find the courage to face what I have hidden, or if I will remain forever chained to this darkness, an eternal prisoner of my own guilt. I sit alone in the suffocating darkness of my room, the silence broken only by the faint flicker of the candle's flame. The memories surge through me with relentless force, as if they have been waiting all these years to reclaim their place in my mind. And tonight, they do. The face of that boy, the boy I chose to bury, rises unbidden from the depths of my conscience, pressing down on me like an iron weight. It started as a faint whisper in the back of my mind, a trembling reminder of a night long past. But now it screams. His voice, muffled by my own silence, echoes with renewed clarity. I see him, small, fragile, desperate, the innocence shattered, the trust betrayed. I had thought that burying him beneath the earth would silence his screams, would finally put an end to the shame I carried. But I was wrong. The earth doesn't forget, and neither do I. His cries have been buried deep, but they persist in my nightmares, clawing their way back into my waking hours. I remember the night I made the choice. The darkness was thick around me, the heavy soil awaiting my hands. I recall the trembling in my fingers as I dug, the stench of dirt and decay filling my senses. I see his trembling form, trembling with fear, pleading silently for mercy that I could not give. My heart pounding, I forced him down, covering his body with earth. I convinced myself it was for his protection from a world that would never understand, never forgive. But the truth was far darker. I was afraid. Afraid of what I had done, of what I was capable of the consequences if anyone ever found out the truth. So I buried him alive, not just his body, but my conscience, my morality, my very soul. Years have passed since that night, and I have lived with this weight, wearing it like a shroud I cannot shed. I buried the boy, yes, but I also buried the memories, the guilt, the shame. I told myself that I had done what was necessary, that the silence was my salvation, that the secrets I kept would keep me safe. But as I sit here now, that illusion crumbles. The boy's pain has found its way back into my mind, relentless and unforgiving. The ache of his innocence lost, That ache has never truly left me. Tonight the pain intensifies, spiraling into a feverish desperation. Sleep has been impossible, my mind a battlefield of torment. And then a thought emerges, an unthinkable act, born out of abject despair. I realize that I cannot continue carrying this burden alone. The guilt festers within me like a wound that refuses to heal. I have reached a point where silence is no longer an option. The past demands to be confronted, to be unburied. I find myself on the brink of a decision so radical it terrifies me. The road ahead is shrouded in darkness, uncertain and treacherous, but I know I must walk it. The idea of unearthing that boy's remains, the physical manifestation of my buried sins, becomes an obsession. Perhaps by doing so, I can finally find some measure of peace, some redemption from this hell I have wrought. In my mind, I see myself digging again, this time with trembling resolve. I imagine the cold earth giving way beneath my fingers, the dirt falling away to reveal what I have hidden for so long. The thought sparks a shiver down my spine. Am I seeking punishment or salvation? Perhaps both. Because I realize that only by confronting the horrors I have concealed can I hope to forgive myself, or at least to understand what I have become. I am overwhelmed by a need to atone, to unmask the darkness that has defined me for so many years. The boy's face haunts me, an unhealed wound that refuses to close. I am painfully aware that no act of confession or remorse can undo what has been done, but still, I cling to the fragile hope that I can find some semblance of redemption in facing the truth. I tremble at the thought of unearthing him, of confronting the grave I so desperately tried to forget, but I know that this is the only path left. I sit back, trembling, sweat beading on my brow. The candle sputters as if reluctant to shed light on my sins. The silence is deafening, amplifying the pounding of my heart. I know that I must act. I feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me, an unbearable burden that I can no longer ignore. The night stretches before me, a chasm of uncertainty, but I am resolved, driven by a mixture of dread and hope, to break the silence, to unbury the truth and finally face the demons I have kept hidden. Because if I do not, I fear I will remain forever lost, an eternal prisoner of my own guilt, condemned to wander this darkness alone. And as the candle's flame flickers one last time, I whisper a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for strength, for the courage to unearth what I have long buried, for the chance to finally confront the boy I abandoned in the earth, and perhaps in doing so, find a way to unbury my own soul. I kneel in the dim candlelight, the flickering flame casting elongated shadows that dance around my trembling form. My hands rest on my thighs, clammy and unsteady, as if the weight of what I've done presses down on me with relentless force. The soil beneath me feels icy, an unforgiving shroud that sealed away a nightmare I could no longer bear to confront. I remember his last cries muffled by the earth, the desperate plea for mercy, long silenced by my own silence, by the unthinkable act I committed out of a twisted sense of justice, or perhaps my own sick obsession with control. My mind races, spiraling, back to that day, that moment, when I decided to bury Marcos Dantas alive. I can still see his face, pale, desperate, pleading, etched into my memory with cruel clarity. I had believed I was protecting the innocent, shielding the church from disgrace, punishing what I deemed evil. But as the dirt covered him, so did my conscience sink into darkness. I convinced myself that this was necessary, that he deserved it, that I was doing God's work. And yet, deep down, I knew I was just suppressing my own demons, transforming my guilt into a twisted act of vengeance. Now, standing here in the cold silence of the night, I feel the echoes of that moment coursing through my veins. Each breath is labored, each beat of my heart loud as a drum in the hollow cavern of my chest. The guilt gnaws at me relentlessly, gnashing its teeth in my mind. I know I can't undo what's been done, and perhaps that's what terrifies me most, that I am beyond redemption, that my soul is forever stained by this act. But still I feel the compulsion to unearth him, ritually, physically, emotionally, to confront the darkness I've buried, to stare into the abyss I created. The earth feels heavy in my hands, as if it resists my attempt to unearth what I've hidden. I grip the shovel tightly, knuckles white as I begin to scrape away at the cold soil. Each shovelful feels like a sacrilege, a violation of the peace I had tried to impose on my conscience. I am acutely aware that this act is not just about Marcos, but about me, about facing the monstrosity I am capable of. I am risking everything, my reputation, my faith, my very soul, to bring this buried truth to light. I pause, listening to the night, the sounds of the forest around me, crickets, distant owl calls, normalcy mocking my turmoil. My hands tremble as I reveal the outline of his grave, the contours of the earth still disturbed from my last effort to hide him. The scent of damp soil fills my nostrils, a stinging reminder of what I've done. Tears threaten to spill, but I hold them back, knowing that to show weakness now would be to surrender to the guilt that has haunted me all these years. Why did I do it? Was it rage, fear, a misguided sense of justice, or merely my own cowardice refusing to face the truth of my own dark impulses? I cannot say for certain anymore. What I do know is that I am here now, standing over the grave of a man I once called a sinner, now a prisoner of my own sins. I feel a strange mixture of remorse and relief, remorse for the act itself. Relief that I have finally confronted the ghost that had haunted me relentlessly. As I dig deeper, my hands raw and trembling, I consider the weight of this confession. I have buried more than a man tonight. I have buried a piece of my conscience, sealed away in the cold earth, hoping it would never see the light of day. But I realize that hiding from the truth only prolongs my suffering. The act of unearthing him is not just about punishment. It is about acknowledgement, about finally exposing the darkness within me that I have long denied. Every shovelful of dirt I remove feels like peeling back the layers of my own soul. With each grain of soil I confront the silence I once maintained. I am acutely aware of the irony, that I, a man of faith who has preached forgiveness and salvation, am now forced to face the reality of my own hell. The man I buried represents a truth I desperately wanted to suppress, but now I see that truth cannot be silenced forever. My hands finally strike the wooden coffin I had hastily buried, an object that feels as much like a prison as it is a vessel. I hesitate, my breath catching in my throat. The moment is surreal, standing here with the weight of my actions pressing against my chest. Feeling the past's cold grip tighten around me, I long to turn away, to run from this grotesque revelation, but I know I must see it through. With a trembling breath I pry open the lid, expecting to find the grotesque spectacle I have conjured in my mind. Instead I am met with silence, an eerie, suffocating silence that screams louder than any cry. His face is pale, lips parted as if in a final gasp. I stare at him, not with malice but with a profound sense of loss, a loss of innocence, of humanity, of myself. And in that moment, I understand that I am not just unearthing Marcos Dantas. I am unearthing the twisted, broken fragment of who I have become. I cannot say what will come next. Perhaps I will confess to the authorities, confess to myself. Perhaps I will carry this burden to my grave. Whatever the future holds, I know now that I have to live with this truth, this unspeakable act that I committed in the name of righteousness, cloaked in darkness, hidden beneath the earth. I close the coffin gently, the cold wood pressing against my palms, a final act of acknowledgement. As I rise from the grave, dirt clinging to my skin and clothes, I feel the weight of the night settle heavier upon me. I am a man forever changed by what I have done, by what I have uncovered. No prayer can wash this guilt away. No confession can absolve what I have buried alive. But in this moment I accept it. I accept the darkness I've created, knowing that I am now truly awakened to the monster lurking inside me, a monster I can no longer deny. And so I turn away from the grave, whispering a silent promise. To carry this burden, to seek whatever redemption I can salvage from these depths of shame, to live with the ghost of Marcos Dantas, forever part of my haunted soul, because in confronting what I hid, I've finally begun to see the path to salvation is not through denial but through relentless truth. No matter how horrifying it may be, I kneel there, my hands slick with sweat, trembling as I grasp the rough handle of the shovel. The rain intensifies, each drop slicing through the oppressive silence, a divine punishment washing over me for the act I committed. My heart pounds against my ribs, a relentless drum echoing the chaos inside my mind. I can feel the weight of the earth pressing down, as if the sky itself mourns what I am trying to conceal. The soil looks dark and unforgiving, but I dig with a desperate urgency, driven by a force I cannot fully understand. Every shovelful feels heavier than the last, as if the universe itself is punishing me for my sins. I can almost hear the faint, muffled cries of Marcos Dantas calling out from beneath the surface, a ghostly reminder of the horror I chose to hide. His confession, his pain, all buried alive beneath layers of dirt and lies. Each scoop is a small act of destruction, a layer of my conscience eroding under the weight of this terrible secret. The rain begins to pour harder, drumming against my skin as if the heavens are weeping for the innocence lost and for my own soul. It stings my face, my hands, blurring my vision but sharpening the image of what I am doing. I feel the cold seep through my clothes, numbing my skin but igniting an internal fire of guilt that refuses to die. The act feels both inevitable and monstrous, a moment forged in the depths of my darkest conviction. As I break the ground, my mind flashes to the confessions I so often heard within these walls. I was supposed to be a vessel of salvation, a guide through darkness, yet I have become the architect of my own damnation. I've buried more than just a man tonight. I've buried parts of myself I'd hoped to suppress. Perhaps I thought that by hiding him, I could silence the truth forever. But every shovelful reveals that the truth is not so easily contained. It burrows deeper, gnawing at the edges of my conscience. The rain turns to a deluge, the water pooling in the freshly dug hole, swirling with the dirt and my despair. My hands tremble violently now, not just from the cold, but from the raw realization that I have crossed a line I can never uncross. I remember his confession, his words spilled in the dim light of this very church, and I feel a sickening mix of shame and resolve. I'd convinced myself that I was protecting the innocent, that I was purifying my soul by punishing him in the shadows. But in truth I was only trying to quiet my own demons, smothering them beneath layers of earth and silence. I pause, my chest heaving, eyes fixed on the mound of dirt that grows taller with each shovelful. The storm rages on, a chaotic symphony that mirrors the storm inside me, an uncontrollable tempest of guilt, fear, and remorse. I want to scream at the heavens, at myself, at the unrelenting darkness that now feels like a part of me. Yet I remain silent, my body exhausted, my spirit battered. I am painfully aware that this act will forever mark me. I am now a man who has buried the truth alive, who has silenced what could never truly be silenced. My fingers scrape against a root, twisting as I force another handful of earth into the grave. I picture Marcos Dantas, his face, his eyes, the desperation in his voice as he confessed. Did he sense the darkness within me? Did he understand that I would become the gravekeeper of his secret, that I would hide his sins beneath the soil? Perhaps he did, and that's why he chose to speak, knowing that his words could doom him or set him free. I wonder if he ever truly believed in redemption, or if he knew that some secrets are meant to stay buried. Standing there, soaked through, I feel the weight of the rain and my guilt pressing against my skin. The storm's fury seems to echo my own internal chaos, an unforgiving reminder that some acts have no redemption, only regret. I'm no longer a man of faith, only a vessel of darkness, a witness to my own despair. The earth absorbs the last shovelful, sealing away the horrors concealed beneath it. I wipe the rain from my face, my hands trembling violently as I stand and look down at what I've done. The world around me is a blur of grey and silver, the storm washing away the evidence of my deed, yet leaving the scars etched deep within my soul. I turn away from the freshly buried grave, my footsteps heavy as lead, feeling the weight of what I've sacrificed: innocence, morality, peace of mind. In this moment I understand that no act, no matter how justified I convinced myself it was, can absolve me of what I've done. All that remains is the haunting silence of the earth, and the endless echo of Marcos Dantas' face, forever etched into my memory. I am a man who has buried more than a body. I've buried part of his truth and perhaps part of my own salvation. As I walk away, the rain continues to fall, washing away the dirt, but never the remorse. The storm seems to rage not just outside but within me, an unrelenting tempest of guilt that I will carry to my grave. And I realize with a sinking certainty that this night will haunt me for eternity, a testament to the darkness I once believed I could contain. and now can never escape. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling, as I try to cling to some fragment of sanity amid the chaos swirling inside me. The weight of the secret I carry feels suffocating, pressing down on my chest so heavily that I fear I might shatter under it. It's been years since I committed that act, yet each night it resurfaces with brutal clarity, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness until I am left hollow and exhausted. I close my eyes, seeking refuge in the darkness, but all I can see is his face, Marcos's face, haunted by the last flickering moments before I buried him alive. The memory is like a poison seeped deep into my bones, an unending reminder of what I've done. I remember how his eyes widened in shock as I pushed the earth over him, how he clawed desperately at the soil, pleading, begging for mercy that I denied him, just as I denied myself any hope of redemption. Sometimes I justify it in my mind. I tell myself I did it out of mercy, that his crimes were too heinous to be left unpunished. I convince myself that I was the only one capable of carrying out judgment. No judge's gavel, no prison cell could contain the darkness that lurked in Marcos's soul. I picture his confession. I see the shame that stained his words, and I tell myself I freed him from his sins, from his own torment. Yet even as I construct these stories, a cold voice whispers that I am justifying murder, disguising my guilt with false righteousness. I wonder if I've truly convinced myself, or if my mind is just trying to numb the pain. Each night my thoughts spiral into darker territories, imagining the sound of his screams muffled beneath the soil, the tremor of his fingers grasping at emptiness. My hands, once so steady, tremble incessantly now, as if my guilt has taken root and is growing with every passing moment. I try to drown out these memories by focusing on the present, on the flickering flame of the candle, but it flickers just as wildly as the storm inside me. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had chosen differently, if I had called the authorities, if I had handed him over and let justice run its course. But my decision was made in a moment of twisted clarity, an act I convinced myself was the only way to prevent further horrors. Now that justification feels flimsy, a fragile mask I cling to desperately. Underneath, I know I am just trying to forge some semblance of peace in a sea of chaos and regret, and yet I can't escape the hollow ache in my chest whenever I remember how I felt that day, how I convinced myself that I was acting out of mercy, of justice, of something greater than my own despair. But deep down I know I was just trying to silence the scream that refused to fade, my own scream, muffled by the dirt and darkness. That scream still echoes in my mind, a relentless chorus that refuses to die. I find myself questioning whether the act itself has fragmented my soul beyond repair. I feel like shards of my spirit scatter with every heartbeat. Some days I believe I'm hollowed out, a shell walking among the living, carrying an invisible burden that no prayer can lift. Other days, I convince myself that I am still capable of redemption, that somehow I can find a way to atone, to balance the scales of my own justice. But the truth is, I am trapped in this cycle of guilt and justification, each feeding the other in a cruel dance. I speak to myself in silence, trying to rationalize the unthinkable, trying to find meaning in the darkness I've willingly embraced. I tell myself that the man's confession was the only truth I ever needed, that burying him was an act of mercy, not murder. Yet every fiber of my being screams that I've crossed a line from which I can never return. Sometimes I wonder if the darkness I've become is permanent. Is this what it means to carry such a secret, to live with it buried inside, growing like a malignant tumor, slowly consuming everything good within me? Each night as sleep eludes me, I see his face again, hear the muffled cries beneath the earth, and feel the cold grip of despair tightening around my throat. I try to find solace in the prayers I no longer believe in, whispering hollow words into the shadows of my room. I seek redemption in the faint hope that forgiveness might someday come. But I know that forgiveness is a distant dream, a faint glimmer on the horizon I'll never reach. My conscience is scarred, fractured beyond repair, and I am painfully aware that I carry the weight of this secret, not just in my mind, but etched into the very marrow of my bones. And so I sit here consumed by the darkness I created, haunted by the ghost of my own actions. I wonder how long I can continue to live with this burden, knowing that each day brings me closer to a breaking point. I am a man shredded by guilt, a soul torn apart by the terrible truth I've buried beneath the earth. And as I look into the flickering candlelight, I realize that perhaps I am already lost, forever condemned to carry the weight of my silence, the echo of Marcos Dantas's final cry, and the darkness that now defines me. Kneeling in the faint glow of the candle, I feel the tremor in my hands, an involuntary shiver that never leaves me. The memory of Marcos Dantas's final breath, the earth swallowing his screams, lingers in my mind like a relentless spectre. I see him in my darkened thoughts, a shadow twisting beneath the soil, a ghost that refuses to fade. His face haunts me, not in the way of a typical nightmare, but as a visceral reminder of what I have done and what I can never undo. The night after the burial blurred into an endless nightmare of echoes and visions. I remember waking up gasping, sweat slicked across my brow, my heart pounding as if trying to escape my chest. In my dreams, Marcos stands before me, his eyes once pleading, now filled with a mixture of betrayal and condemnation. His voice echoes through the void, accusing me of a justice I was never meant to deliver. "Why?" he whispers softly, but with enough force to shake my core. "Why did you decide my fate?" I try to tell myself that I did it for mercy, that I acted out of compassion for a broken soul, but deep down I know the truth is far more complicated. I was driven by fear, fear of what might happen if I ignored his confession, fear of the darkness lurking in the shadows of this church that I swore to protect. My mind reels with the memory of his words, the horrible, undeniable truth he confessed. I believed that silencing him would bring peace, my peace, but instead it planted a seed of terror that now roots itself in my consciousness. Every night, the visions intensify. I see Marcos's face cracked and bloodied, his eyes wide with a mix of pain and betrayal. I hear the muffled sound of soil being shoveled over him, a terrible symphony of finality. The earth's cold grip still wraps around him as I imagine him begging for mercy, for a second chance that I denied him. And yet I feel no relief, only a growing dread that what I've done is irreparable, that I've crossed a line from which there is no return. My days are no less tormenting. I move through the church corridors like a ghost myself, each step heavy with the weight of my secret. The confession I made to myself, this act of mercy, has become a noose tightening around my neck. I find myself clutching at straws, praying for forgiveness that may never come, whispering hollow prayers into the darkness of my lonely cell. I ask for redemption, for some sign that I am still salvageable, but the silence I receive is deafening. Sometimes I think about the others, those who have looked to me for spiritual guidance. Do they sense the darkness that now consumes me? Are their prayers for me, or do they simply carry on unaware of the terrible secret I harbor? Perhaps my guilt is a silent punishment, a penance I have chosen to bear. Or perhaps it's a curse I brought upon myself, a consequence of choices made in the shadows where no light can reach. There are moments when I am overwhelmed by the sensation of his presence, as if Marcos's spirit lingers just beyond the veil, angry and betrayed. I feel a coldness seep into my bones, a reminder of the crime I committed, a punishment I've inflicted upon myself. The guilt festers, eating away at the remnants of my faith, stripping me of my hope and leaving me with only the bitter taste of regret. I question how much longer I can survive under this weight, how long I can sustain this fragile veneer of composure before everything collapses. In those quiet hours, I dwell on the act of burying Marcos alive. Was I driven by a desire for justice, or was I simply afraid? Did I truly believe that silence could cleanse my conscience, or was I trying to silence a part of myself I refuse to accept? Each thought spirals into another, a labyrinth of shame and sorrow with no exit in sight. I clutch the crucifix hanging around my neck, seeking solace in its cold, unyielding surface, yet finding none. Sometimes I wonder if redemption exists at all. If the Church's teachings offer any hope for a man like me, one who has committed such an unforgivable act. I've read about divine forgiveness, about mercy for even the gravest sinners, but I feel my own sins are too great, too stained by what I've done. The darkness I've embraced feels permanent, a shadow that will forever cloud my soul. I am trapped within my own mind, a prisoner of my guilt and regret. The act I justified as mercy now feels like a prison cell. I am forever locked inside it with only the ghost of Marcos and my own remorse for company. I know I must confront this darkness someday, face whatever judgment awaits, but for now I remain here, kneeling in the candlelight, haunted by the unspoken truth, knowing that the weight of my secret will follow me into whatever comes next, and so I sit in silence, listening to the whispers of my conscience, knowing that I have crossed a boundary from which I may never return. I sit in my secluded corner of the church, the flickering candle casting long shadows across my trembling hands. It feels as if the walls are closing in, whispering secrets I dare not hear aloud. A growing sense of unease creeps up my spine, like a shadow stretching nearer with each passing moment. I notice the subtle glances from the parishioners, heads turned slightly, eyes lingering just a second longer than usual. Those little signs that perhaps they sense something beneath my composed surface. My paranoia erupts like a sudden storm. Every whisper of wind against the stained glass windows, every creak of the old wooden pews, seems to carry a new accusation. I am convinced that they are watching me, that under their quiet gazes, suspicion festers like a wound I cannot tend. The small town's serenity feels like a facade, and I am the only one blind to the cracks that threaten to fracture everything I hold dear. It's as if a dark cloud has settled over the congregation, and I am caught beneath its oppressive weight. I see the furtive glances exchanged behind hands, the subtle shifting in seats, the way some whisper just a little too softly when they think I'm not paying attention. My mind spins stories, each more sinister than the last, about how the truth might be slipping from my grasp, exposing me to judgment I am unprepared to face. I find myself retreating further into my thoughts, my eyes darting around the room. Every small noise, an echo from the hallway, the distant cry of a child, becomes a herald of impending revelation. I feel the sweat prickle on my brow as my pulse quickens. My ears strain at every murmur, every hushed conversation, as if I can hear their doubts, their accusations manifesting in hushed voices behind the church's aged walls. The paranoia gnaws at me, relentless. I become convinced that someone, anyone, knows, and is just waiting for the right moment to unveil my secret. I envision whispers turning into shouts, accusations raining down like hail, tearing apart the fragile illusion of peace I've desperately tried to maintain. My mind conjures images of the community gathering, pointing fingers, condemning me for sins I cannot unsee. I feel as if I am standing on the edge of a precipice, each step closer to exposure trembling beneath my feet. I clutch my rosary tightly, as if physically anchoring myself to some semblance of sanity. I pray, though my words feel hollow, pleading for mercy, for forgiveness, for a miracle that might absolve me of this mounting guilt. Inside, a tempest rages. I am caught between the necessity of concealment and the desperate longing to confess, to unburden myself from this crushing burden. Yet fear keeps me shackled, silence my only shield. My thoughts spiral further into despair. I wonder how much longer I can hold this facade, how long I can pretend that everything is normal, while my insides churn with dread. I see the faces of my parishioners, their smiles masking suspicion, their polite inquiries hiding questions they dare not voice. And I am convinced they are closer than ever to uncovering what I have tried so desperately to hide. Each passing day feels like walking a tightrope over a pit of darkness. The community's quiet suspicion becomes a tangible presence, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I imagine their eyes narrowing, voices lowering, secrets unraveling in hushed conversations that I am not part of, but feel inexorably drawn into. The sense that I am being watched, judged, and ultimately condemned grows heavier with every moment. I can't escape the feeling that the walls are whispering my name, that the very fabric of my supposed sanctuary is stretching thin, ready to burst. The shadows I see flickering at the corner of my vision seem to shift and grow, embodying the suspicion I cannot escape. My paranoia morphs into a relentless beast, gnawing at my resolve, blurring the lines between reality and my darkest fears. In this suffocating silence, I surrender to the dread that I am unraveling. Each glance, each whisper, feels like a thread pulling me closer to the edge. My mind is a battlefield, one side urging me to face the truth, the other urging me to run, to hide, to deny everything. I clutch my hands around the crucifix, seeking some divine reassurance, some sign that I might withstand this storm. But deep down, I know the truth is inevitable. The suspicion grows like a cancer, spreading through the community. and I am the only one who remains unaware of how close they are to uncovering my secret. The darkness I've buried beneath my guilt threatens to consume me entirely. I am caught in a web of my own making, and I dread the moment when the threads will snap, exposing me to a judgment from which there is no escape. For now, I stay silent. I continue to pray in whispers, hoping that somehow I can stave off the inevitable, that the shadows and whispers will fade. Yet even as I try to hold on to this fragile hope, I feel the weight of their suspicion pressing down on me, an inescapable, suffocating shadow that creeps ever closer, ready to swallow me whole. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling as I clutch the cold wood of the confession booth. The flickering flame casts shifting shadows across my face, mirroring the turbulence within my soul. As I gaze down at the worn pages of the Bible I hold, I feel a strange sense of both solace and torment, an attempt to find redemption amidst the darkness I've carried for so long. My mind drifts back to that night, an unthinkable act I committed in a moment of twisted conviction. I buried the man alive beneath layers of earth and silence, silenced not just by the weight of soil, but by the weight of my own guilt. His final screams echo faintly in my thoughts, a haunting refrain that refuses to fade. Every shovelful of dirt I pressed onto him felt like sealing my own fate, a grim pact I made with myself to keep the darkness hidden. The earth's coldness still clings to my skin, a chilling reminder of what I did. I remember the way his body had gone rigid, the way his eyes had pleaded for mercy I could neither give nor hear. I remember the moment I pressed the last handful of soil and stepped back, feeling an inexplicable relief coupled with an unshakable dread. I knew deep in my heart that I had committed an unforgivable sin, a sin I now carry as a heavy cross. I whisper prayers, my voice trembling as I ask for forgiveness, but no words seem enough. Do I truly seek redemption, or am I merely trying to drown out the echoes of my own conscience? The confessionals are meant for absolution, but I know mine is a lie, an act of desperation to convince myself that I can somehow undo what I have done. The truth is buried deeper than the earth I once covered him with, buried beneath layers of guilt, shame, and denial. My fingers tighten around the Bible, clutching the edges as if to anchor myself to something real, something divine. I read passages, searching for meaning in words that feel hollow now, words that once offered comfort but now seem distant, unreachable. Every verse feels like a paradox, a reminder of the divine mercy I crave yet doubt I deserve. As I read, I am overwhelmed by the weight of my secret, a secret that threatens to crush my very soul. I know that if anyone ever discovers the truth, the church I serve, the community I lead, all will turn against me. The facade of sanctity I've cultivated is fragile, fragile enough to shatter with a single revelation. I picture their faces, disgust, betrayal, the unraveling of everything I've built my life upon. I am caught in a web of my own making, each strand woven tighter with every lie I tell myself. I wonder how much longer I can keep this hidden, how much longer I can maintain the illusion of holiness while carrying such a monstrous burden inside. The line between right and wrong blurs beneath the weight of my guilt, and I fear that sooner or later, the darkness I've buried will surface, unstoppable and unforgiving. I whisper one last prayer, pleading, not for forgiveness but for strength to endure what's coming. I know that in the silence of this confession booth, I am not truly confessing. I am only hiding, hoping that somehow the shadows I cast over my soul will remain unseen. Yet I feel the gnawing sensation that the earth I buried him under is not enough to contain the truth, that it will rise again, like a ghost, to reveal the darkness lurking beneath my piety. The candle flickers again, casting fleeting glimmers of light on my trembling hands. I close my eyes, trying to steady my breath, to muster the courage to face whatever judgment awaits. I am painfully aware that my salvation hinges on my capacity to accept the guilt I have long suppressed. But a part of me whispers that perhaps it's already too late, that the sins I've committed have seeped into every corner of my being, unchangeable, eternal. In this moment I realize that my confession is not an act of redemption, but a fragile act of self-preservation. I pray with every ounce of my fractured soul for the strength to carry this burden, for the courage to face the consequences of my sins. Yet deep down I know the truth remains buried, waiting for the inevitable moment when the earth will no longer hold it, and I will be forced to confront the horror I've hidden from the world and myself as I stand on the cracked pavement of the city's quiet streets. I am unexpectedly face to face with Marcos. He's alive, more dangerous than ever, a living reminder of the darkness I thought I had buried deep beneath the earth. His eyes lock onto mine with an intensity that makes my blood run cold. And in that moment, I feel the foundations of my faith tremble beneath me. Marcos's presence is a storm that threatens to shatter everything I've held sacred. I notice the subtle change in him. This isn't the same man I once knew. His expression is sharper, darker, filled with a quiet menace that wasn't there before. I sense that he's not just alive. He's transformed into something more feral, more unpredictable. The years have carved lines into his face, but beneath that, I see a ferocity that could consume me if I let it. My mind spins with the chaos of conflicting truths. How could Marcos survive? And what does it mean for me? This man who once whispered confessions in sacred silence, now standing before me alive and dangerous. I feel the weight of my previous actions pressing down again, as if his revival is a direct challenge to everything I've tried to suppress. Does this mean the sins I thought buried are sprouting, ready to erupt all over again? I'm caught in an internal maelstrom, my faith warring with instinct, morality clashing with fear. The Church's teachings flood my mind, concepts of forgiveness, redemption, salvation, but here in the harsh reality of this moment, they seem empty, insufficient to contain the chaos within me. I ask myself whether I am the same man I was when I buried Marcos beneath the earth, or if I've become something else entirely, something unrecognizable, perhaps lost to my own darkness. Part of me screams to run, to turn away from this confrontation, but my feet feel rooted to the ground. I cannot ignore the look in his eyes. There's a hunger, a predatory gleam that makes my skin crawl. I wonder if he remembers what I did, if he knows that I buried him alive for what he confessed, or if he's come back to finish what was started. The thought of my own complicity, my silent complicity, makes my stomach churn. My mind drifts back to the night I buried him, how I convinced myself it was for the greater good, a necessary act to protect others, to preserve the sanctity of the Church. But now, with Marcos standing before me, that justification feels hollow, stained with the blood of my own sins. I realize that I have been living in a fragile illusion, maintaining a facade of morality, while the darkness inch by inch has seeped into my bones. The city around us is quiet, yet inside me there's a tempest. The words I want to say refuse to form. My throat tightens like a vice. I want to deny everything, to cling to my faith and morality, but I know those defenses are crumbling. The truth is no longer contained behind the confessional door. It's standing there, alive, dangerous, and no longer hidden by the earth I buried him in. In this moment, I am painfully aware that my spiritual journey is at a crossroads. The man I was, the priest who believed in forgiveness and redemption, questions now whether those ideals are just illusions. Can I reconcile the man I was with the man I've become? Or is this encounter a harbinger of the reckoning I've long feared? I clutch my rosary tightly, feeling the cold beads slip between my fingers. I pray, perhaps not for salvation, but for the strength to withstand what's inevitable. I pray for clarity, for the courage to face my sins, those I buried, and those that have now come back to haunt me. Marcos's survival isn't just a shock. It's a mirror reflecting the depths of my own moral abyss. I wonder if I will ever be able to look at myself again without shame, without the bitter taste of guilt lingering on my tongue. As he steps closer, I see the flickering shadows of the past, my darkest secrets that refuse to stay buried. I am confronted with the horrifying possibility that the earth I thought would contain everything may soon give way, unleashing everything I have tried to forget. And in that moment I realize there is no escape from this truth. It's alive, it's dangerous, and it's coming for me. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling as I stare at the cold, unyielding ground before me. The shadows dance across the earth, flickering like the ghosts of my past, mocking my futile attempt at absolution. I can still hear his final cries, muffled and distant, echoing in the hollow chambers of my mind. It's as if the earth itself has absorbed his screams, locking away the horror I've committed, hiding it beneath layers of soil and silence. My body feels heavy, weighed down by the memory of what I've done, But my mind is even heavier, haunted by the unspoken truth that I've kept buried for too long. I remember the confession, the trembling voice that revealed his guilt. The way I convinced myself that justice meant silence, that sealing his fate beneath the earth was an act of mercy. But mercy has forsaken me now. What I buried alive is stirring, desperate to claw its way back into the light. My fingers tighten around the rosary in my pocket, clutching it with a desperation that borders on madness. I silently plead with the heavens, begging for forgiveness I know I don't deserve. The Church's teachings clash with the reality in front of me. What am I if I choose to unearth him? Am I still a man of faith, or just a monster hiding behind sacred words? Every prayer sounds hollow, every plea a whisper against the roaring chaos within. A gust of wind sweeps across the grave, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible sound. Faint footsteps, perhaps, or the faint rustle of fabric. My heart pounds fiercely, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of impending decision. Marcos is alive, and that terrifies me more than his confession ever did. His survival is no longer just a secret. It's a mirror held up to my soul, revealing the darkest corners I've managed to ignore. As he steps closer, his shadow looming over the freshly filled earth, I feel the cold sweat sliding down my forehead, the tremor in my hands betraying my resolve. I can see his eyes now, flickering like a candle about to burn out, filled with pain, anger, and something darker I dare not name. The time has come, the moment of reckoning. I rise slowly, my movements stiff, deliberate. Each step I take toward him feels like walking toward my own condemnation. I could walk away, leave him here, let the earth swallow him further and wash my hands of all this. But the truth gnaws at me, relentless and insistent. It demands that I face what I've done, what I've hidden, and what I still refuse to admit. The question hangs in the air. Should I confront him now, bring him to justice, or end it all here? I stare into his eyes, searching for the weakness, the remorse, the madness I fear I might see. Or maybe I'm looking for a way out, a justification for the heinous act I committed, burying a man alive to silence his confession. I reach into my pocket and grip the cold metal of the small dagger I concealed there. Its weight reassures me. No, it terrifies me. The impulse to end everything, to silence the threat once and for all, surges through me. Maybe it's easier to be the executioner than to face the chaos of caged secrets. I wonder if I could do it, if I have the strength to finish what I started. But then a voice inside me whispers, no, not here, not tonight. I can't let this darkness consume what little humanity I have left. Instead, I take a shaky breath, steadying myself, and step forward. I am the priest, the man of God, but I am also human, broken, and damned in my own right. The choice is mine, to confront my sins, to seek redemption through truth, or to bury them deeper, sealing my fate in silence forever. The night stretches long and heavy around us, thick with unspoken truths. I know what I must do, and I know that whatever I decide will forever alter the course of my existence. I will face him, either to bring light into this darkness or to plunge further into it. And in that moment I realize the final truth. I can't run from my sins anymore. The earth may have once protected me, but now it's trembling, ready to give way. And when it does, I need to be prepared for what rises from beneath. I kneel there, in the flickering candlelight that casts elongated shadows across the cold stone floor. My hands are clammy, trembling as I clutch the fabric of my robe, my mind a tumult of contrition and fury. I can still hear the faint muffled sobs from the confession I forced from Marcos. A confession I knew would be dangerous, a confession I knew would threaten everything I thought I knew about myself. The memory of that moment plays like a haunting melody, his voice trembling not just from fear, but from something darker, something primal. I remember the way his words tumbled out, revealing the unspeakable horrors he'd committed against that innocent girl, the Coroinha. I had felt a surge of righteous anger, but beneath that was a chilling resolve, one that I buried deep within me. I knew then and there what I had to do. When Marcos looked me in the eyes and begged for forgiveness, I felt my own resolve harden. Forgiveness was a luxury I could not grant. Justice, yes, but not in the way he imagined. Instead, I devised a plan, a terrible plan, one that would silence his secrets forever. I led him to the underground crypt, beneath the altar where no one dared to go. The shadows were thick there, whispering promises of darkness and finality. I remember the way my heart pounded. each beat echoing in my ears like a death knell. I remember the moment I pushed him into the shallow grave I'd prepared, just enough earth to hide him, just enough to contain the monster he was. His screams were muffled by dirt, muffled by the weight of my decision. I clenched my fists, feeling the cold dirt between my fingers, and I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross. For a fleeting second, my mind wavered. Was this truly justice, or merely a reflection of my own despair and guilt? I pushed the thought aside, telling myself it was salvation, that this act was necessary to protect others and to cleanse my own soul. Now, standing here, I feel the weight of that deed pressing down on my chest. The guilt is a heavy shroud, suffocating but also strangely familiar, like an old worn blanket I can't throw away. I question my own motives, the righteousness I clung to, the mercy I desperately sought. Did I do this out of justice, or was it driven by a darker, more primal instinct, to silence, to punish, to erase what I could not bear to confront? My mind writhes with questions I dare not answer, yet beneath it all a flicker of hope persists. Perhaps in some twisted way, this act was an attempt to redeem myself, to atone for the sins I failed to prevent, for the broken trust I betrayed by allowing the darkness to fester within my church. I have always believed in forgiveness, in salvation, but now I wonder if my actions have forged a new path, one paved with shadows and regret. I look at my trembling hands, the dirt under my nails, the faint scent of earth and decay. I think of Marcos and his desperate eyes, now silent, forever sealed in the darkness. I wonder if he felt any remorse in his final moments, or if he was simply resigned to his fate. I wonder if God will forgive me. I wonder if I can forgive myself. The silence in the chapel is deafening, broken only by the echo of my own breathing. I am a man torn between faith and damnation, caught in a web of my own making. I know I must face the consequences, whether in this life or the next. The ghosts of my actions will haunt me, no matter how fervently I pray or how deeply I seek redemption. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a small voice inside whispers, a fragile hope that perhaps somehow I will find a way to reconcile my sins. That maybe through confession and sacrifice, I can atone for this terrible act. That I can somehow restore the broken trust I betrayed, not just with others but with myself. I close my eyes briefly, summoning the strength I need to carry this burden. The earth may have once protected me, shielding my sins, but now it trembles beneath my feet, telling me that nothing remains hidden forever. The truth, no matter how dark, will always seek the light. And I know that the moment I stand and speak my sin aloud, I begin a journey toward whatever redemption is possible for someone like me, someone who has buried a monster alive, in the hopes that it would save everyone else, even if it meant destroying a piece of his own soul in the process. I can feel my muscles tense as I brace myself against Marcos, my grip tightening around his collar as if I can force the truth from his trembling lips. His eyes dart wildly, a mixture of fear and defiance, but I see through the facade. I know what he's confessed, his dark secrets, his vile confessions that no one else dared hear. And now, standing at this precipice, I have become both judge and executioner, but unlike the law, I hold no mercy in my heart. His body is a trembling mass beneath my hands, sweat slick and cold. I strain to hold him down, feeling the raw power of my own desperation, the need to put an end to this chaos I've unleashed. My mind races. Should I go further? Should I press harder, squeeze tighter to drown out his protests? Or should I stop, release him, and let the truth suffocate in silence? Every fiber of my being screams at me to act, to punish him for the sins he's confessed, for the monsters he's unleashed. The air thickens with tension, suffocating in its weight. Marcos's breath comes ragged as he fights, his fists pounding weakly against my chest, futile efforts that only remind me of the fragility of his resistance. My eyes flick downward, caught in the whirlpool of my own conflicted thoughts. Part of me longs to silence him forever, to bury this confession as deep as I buried him alive tonight. The other part screams that I am crossing a line, that I am becoming something darker than I ever imagined. My knuckles grind against his skin as I grip his shoulders, force him to meet my gaze. I want him to look at me, to see the madness I'm wearing like a second skin. I whisper, voice rough and cracking, "Tell me everything, say it. Say what you did." The words hang in the air, more brutal than any punch, more raw than any scream. I watch his lips tremble, waiting for the confession that will shatter whatever remains of my own humanity. And then, in a flash of violent clarity, I see the horror in his eyes, acceptance, resignation, perhaps even relief. That's when I lose control. I slam him against the cold stone wall, my face inches from his. My voice is a growl, feral and desperate. You will never hurt anyone again, not in this life, not in the next. My hands find his throat, firm but not crushing yet. I want him to feel the weight of my fury, the culmination of all my suppressed rage and remorse. His struggles weaken as I squeeze gently, tightening just enough to silence his voice. My own breath comes in ragged gasps, matching his ragged gasps, as I pour every ounce of my fury and anguish into this moment. I see the panic flare in his eyes, the realization that I am no longer the priest, the confessor, but the executioner. I hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, loud and deafening, echoing the chaos within me. For a fleeting second I consider letting go, releasing him back into the darkness. But part of me, an angry, vengeful part, wants to see him broken, to make him suffer as I have suffered. Yet another voice inside whispers, perhaps unbidden, that this is not justice. It's madness, a descent into the very abyss I sought to condemn. Slowly I loosen my grip, my fingers trembling as I let him go. His body slumps, gasping for air, and I stand there, trembling, my hands stained with both blood and guilt. I stare into his eyes, searching for anything. Remorse, defiance, acceptance, and I find only the emptiness of someone who knows they have been finally broken. I take a step back, the world spinning around me. My mind is a tumult of conflicting emotions, shame, anger, despair, all fighting for dominance. I realize I have crossed a line that no prayer can justify. I have become what I despise, a monster cloaked in the guise of justice. The truth is, as I look down at his battered form, I know I have sealed my own damnation, whether I choose to admit it or not, and yet, beneath the layers of fury and guilt, a flicker of something else stirs. A faint hope that perhaps, in this act of destruction, I can find some form of redemption, or maybe I am merely digging my own grave, burying a piece of my soul beneath the weight of what I've done tonight. The earth awaits, cold and silent, ready to swallow my sins whole. But I know deep down that nothing can be truly buried, no matter how deep, no matter how dark. As I turn away from Marcos, I feel the hollow emptiness deep inside. I have fought with my hands, with my faith, with everything I am, trying to find a way to justify this madness. But in the end, all I can do is carry the scars, physical and spiritual, that this night has inflicted. I have shed my humanity tonight, perhaps forever, in pursuit of a twisted version of justice. And as I walk away, I know that this is not the end, but only another beginning, one where the ghosts of my actions will follow me into whatever darkness remains ahead. I knelt in the dim candlelight, the flickering flame casting wavering shadows across my trembling hands. My palms were clammy, each breath shallow and ragged, as if the very air inside me had grown heavy with remorse. I stared at the dirt beneath my knees, the earth that had swallowed so much, his final cries still echoing faintly in my mind, a haunting refrain that refused to fade. It was as if the ground remembered, as if it held onto the weight of what I had done, just as I did. I can't deny that in the quiet darkness of this moment, a strange peace had begun to settle over me, an ache that was almost a balm, a bittersweet acceptance of my own flawed justice. I had sought to punish, to purify, but I realized now that what I had really been after was something more personal, redemption. Not in a divine sense, but in the hollow, aching way that only a soul burdened with guilt could understand. I had buried him, yes, but in some twisted way, I had also tried to bury my own sins beneath the soil. My mind keeps circling back to that confession, the night he poured out his darkness with trembling words, desperate for absolution. I remember the fury that surged through me, how it blotted out reason and mercy alike. My hands, so steady before, had become instruments of destruction. I remember the feel of the earth as I pressed him into it, the finality of the shovel scraping against the dirt, the silence that followed. I had acted in what I believed was justice, but now I see that perhaps it was only a desperate attempt to silence my own doubts. In that moment of silence, I feel a strange clarity creeping in, a recognition that my act was more about expiation than victory. I had wanted to believe I was right, that I was protecting the innocent, that I was doing God's work. But underneath it all, I know the truth. I was trying to erase the guilt that clung to me, to make myself feel righteous in the chaos of my own moral failure. A tear escapes, tracing a slow burning path down my cheek. I let it fall onto the cold earth, feeling the roughness against my skin. It's a small, tangible symbol of my pain born from a mixture of grief, relief, and profound sorrow. I'm not sure if I feel redeemed or utterly lost, but I understand one thing with aching certainty. I will carry this burden with me, forever intertwined with my faith and my conscience. This act, this final crossing of a line I once believed sacred, has irrevocably changed me. Yet amidst the tumult of my thoughts, a fragile sense of acceptance begins to take root. I realize that perhaps my justice was more about my own salvation than about the truth itself. Maybe I needed this act to make sense of my fractured soul, to confront the darkness within me that no prayer could reach. I find a strange comfort in knowing that I have faced my own abyss and, however imperfectly, I have made peace with it. If only for a moment. I sit back on my heels, the cool earth pressing against my skin, and breathe slowly. The silence is profound, but no longer oppressive. Instead, it feels like a quiet acknowledgement, a solemn recognition that I am both broken and strangely whole in my brokenness. I have done what I thought necessary, what I believed was justified, and in doing so, I have come to understand that sometimes the only salvation is in accepting our darkest truths. A part of me fears the hollow emptiness that might come later, the endless replay of what I have done, the ghost of that final cry forever etched into my memory. But for now, I let that fear fade. I accept it as part of the price I pay for this fleeting peace. Perhaps in this acceptance I find a sliver of grace, an understanding that even in our most damning acts, there is a quiet, unspoken plea for forgiveness, from others and from ourselves. As I rise slowly, my body stiff and sore, I feel the weight of the night upon me, heavy yet somehow lighter than before. I walk away from the grave, footsteps unsteady but purposeful. I know this will not be the end, that the ghosts I have unleashed will follow me into the dark corners of my soul. But I also know that for now I am at peace, haunted perhaps, but at peace with the truth I have chosen to face. I kneel in the dim candlelight, my hands trembling as I try to steady my breath. The cool air of the church wraps around me, thick with the lingering scent of incense and something darker, something I dare not name aloud. My heart pounds in my chest, a relentless drum echoing the chaos within. I close my eyes briefly, but the darkness behind my eyelids only sharpens the memory of that night, the night I chose to bury him alive. The soil beneath my trembling fingers still feels cold, a brutal reminder of my act. I remember the way his eyes widened in terror, the frantic struggle that was both futile and desperate. I hear the final muffled cry, a sound that haunts me still, seeping into my bones like poison. I did what I thought was necessary, what I convinced myself justice demanded. But as the dirt fell over him, sealing his fate, I felt an unexpected weight lift, as if a part of me had been released from its burden. That was my salvation, or so I told myself. Now as I sit here, my knees pressed against the stone floor, the silence presses back, oppressive and thick. The church's shadows seem to reach for me, whispering truths I cannot bear to face. I wonder, what is justice really? Is it the cold certainty of punishment, or the mercy that allows room for redemption? Perhaps justice is simply the resolution we impose on ourselves, a final act to silence the chaos inside. My mind drifts to the story I have kept hidden for so long. I had a confession, a terrible whispered truth that no one else could hear. When he admitted to his crimes against the innocent girl, something in me shifted. A storm of rage and despair clashed within, and in that chaos I saw only one way out, an ending to the horror that no human justice could fully contain. I convinced myself that his punishment would be complete only if I took it upon myself to end his suffering, to silence his voice forever. The act was brutal, final, and irreversible. I buried him alive, a terrible echo of the punishment he deserved, or so I believed then. But now, as I sit here, I realize that my actions have carved a deeper wound into my soul than any confession could heal. I thought I was protecting the innocent, cleansing the church of its darkness by confronting it head-on. Yet I am left with a hollow emptiness, a gnawing suspicion that my act of mercy, if it can be called that, was merely an extension of my own vengeance, my own need for control. Is this justice? Or is it simply a surrender to the darkness that lurks within all of us, masked by piety and duty? I have tasted the bitter fruit of my decision, and I know that the line between mercy and cruelty blurs easily in the shadows of the human heart. I wonder if even divine mercy can forgive the cruelty I unleashed, or if I have sealed my own damnation in that act. I reflect on the price I paid for my actions, not in gold or earthly punishment, but in the quiet, relentless torment that now haunts my every prayer. I am haunted by the echo of his final cry, a ghost that will never let me go. That moment, so decisive, so horrifying, has become a part of who I am. I carry his fear not as a burden of guilt alone, but as a mirror of my own capacity for darkness. I buried the truth, yes, but I also buried a part of my own humanity beneath layers of shame and regret. I wonder if justice truly exists outside of human perception, or if it is a fragile illusion we cling to in hopes of making sense of our chaos. Mercy, I think, is even more elusive. It demands a surrender that most of us are unwilling to give, especially when our actions stem from a place of desperation or righteousness. I ask myself, what is the cost of mercy? Is it the relinquishing of power, the acceptance of imperfection, or the acknowledgement that sometimes justice is a hollow shell hiding our darkest impulses? In the end, I realize that I am both the executioner and the judge of my own conscience. The church's silent stone walls hold my secrets, bearing witness to my confession. Though not spoken aloud, my silence screams louder than any words. I have paid a high price for my acts, a toll that echoes through every prayer and every breath I take. Yet I wonder, do I seek redemption or merely the illusion of peace before the next storm? As I rise slowly, my body stiff with the weight of years of suppressed guilt, I feel the ache of my sins pressing against my chest. The church's shadows stretch long and dark around me, swallowing my form in their silent embrace. I walk away from this sacred space, not with relief, but with a quiet understanding that some truths never truly leave us. They linger, festering in the corners of our souls, waiting for the moment we are vulnerable enough to face them again. I know this will not be the end. The consequences of my choices will follow me, whispering in the darkness, shaping my every step. But at least now in this moment, I grasp a fragile truth. Perhaps the only salvation lies in accepting the darkness within, in understanding that justice, mercy, and redemption are complex, intertwined shadows that we can never fully tame. And in that acceptance, I find a twisted sense of peace, knowing that I am both the perpetrator and the prisoner of my own conscience.